"That ring isn't real, sir." The boy's voice was so small that, for a moment, Nathaniel Carrington thought the words had come from inside his own head. He was standing at the back of St. Augustine's Cathedral, in the narrow vestibule where the groom waits before the doors open, adjusting the cuff of his shirt for the third time in 5 minutes. The cathedral organ was already playing softly somewhere beyond the heavy oak doors, and he could hear the muffled hum of 300 guests on the other side, the same 300 guests whose names he had memorized from a seating chart his fiancée had handed him 2 weeks earlier. Everything was exactly as it should be. The boutonniere was pinned straight. The rings were in the velvet box his best man had been carrying since morning. The light through the stained glass behind him made a small pattern of red and gold across the marble floor at his feet, and somewhere in the upstairs gallery, a violinist was warming up with a phrase Nathaniel half recognized from his mother's old records. And yet the boy was still standing there in the side doorway near the sacristy, holding a small bunch of white lilies that was meant for the flower girl, watching him with the kind of steady patience that did not belong on a child. "What did you say?" Nathaniel asked. He recognized the boy, or thought he did. The son of the florist, maybe 9 years old, maybe 10. He had seen him an hour earlier setting candles along the aisle with his mother, the two of them working quickly and quietly the way people work when they have been told to be finished before the guests arrive. The boy had looked up once when Nathaniel walked past, and Nathaniel had given him the small polite nod he gave to people whose names he did not know, and the boy had nodded back. "The ring on her finger, sir," the boy said, a little louder this time. "The one she has been wearing, it isn't real." Nathaniel lowered his hand slowly from his cuff. He was a man who had built a life on not reacting to surprises. He was 43 years old. He was the chief executive of Carrington Maritime, a shipping company his grandfather had founded in 1947 and which had been written about in the financial pages of newspapers in 6 countries. He did not change his wedding because a child appeared in a doorway. He did not change anything because of a feeling. He looked at the boy and tried to keep his voice steady. "Son," he said quietly, "what is your name?" The boy hesitated. Then he said, "Elijah." "Elijah," Nathaniel repeated, the way a man repeats a name when he wants to fix it inside his head before he decides what to do with it. "Elijah, I think you should explain that to me, and I think you should do it quickly, because in about 4 minutes those doors are going to open and I'm going to walk down that aisle, and whatever you have to say to me you should say now." The boy did not rush. He shifted the small bunch of lilies to his left hand and stepped fully into the vestibule, and then he reached up and pulled the side door closed behind him with both hands, careful not to let it slam. Up close, Nathaniel could see that the boy's shirt was a borrowed white dress shirt with sleeves rolled twice at the cuffs to make them fit, and his black trousers were a little too short at the ankle. He smelled faintly of the eucalyptus the florist had been arranging at the altar all morning. His eyes were steady, the way the eyes of a child are steady when the child has decided, somewhere inside himself, that he is going to tell the truth even if no one believes him. "I work with my mom on weekends," Elijah said. "We did the flowers for your engagement party back in May. We did the flowers for the rehearsal dinner last night. And we did the flowers for today. I have seen the lady you are marrying 3 different times in the last 2 months. Each time she has been wearing the ring you gave her, and each time, sir, the ring has been a little different." Nathaniel did not move. He felt his own heartbeat in a place he was not used to feeling it, somewhere low under the bone of his chest. The cuff of his shirt was still half buttoned. The organ outside the doors had moved into a quieter passage, the kind that comes just before a piece begins in earnest, and a small part of his mind noted the timing with a strange clinical calm, the way a man notes the time on a clock he is not yet ready to obey. "Different how?" he said. The boy took a small breath. His shoulders trembled once and then settled, the way a small bird settles on a branch after a long flight. At the engagement party, Elijah said, she was wearing a ring with a big square stone, very clear, with two smaller stones on the sides. I noticed it because my mom said it was the most beautiful ring she had ever seen up close, and she let me look at it from a few feet away when the lady was talking to someone else. The stone caught the light in a way that made small rainbows on the wall behind her. My mom said that was because of how diamonds bend the light. Nathaniel nodded slowly. He remembered the ring. He had spent 4 months choosing it. He had flown to a jeweler in Antwerp twice. The center stone was 3.5 carats, cut to specifications his grandmother had recommended before she died, and the two side stones had come from a brooch that had belonged to his mother. He had given the ring to Vivian Ashford on a Sunday afternoon in March in the small garden behind his apartment on the river, and she had cried. "Go on," he said quietly. "At the rehearsal dinner last night," Elijah continued, "she was wearing a ring. It looked almost the same. The big stone in the middle and the two smaller ones on the sides, but the stone in the middle was different. It did not catch the light the same way. When she walked past the candles, the stone got bright for a second and then went dull. A real diamond does not do that, sir. My mom taught me. A real diamond keeps the light. A fake one shows it and then loses it. I watched her for almost 10 minutes from the corner where I was helping with the centerpieces. The ring did not behave like the ring from May." Nathaniel felt the small marble floor under his shoes become very specific beneath his weight. He felt the weight of every guest on the other side of the doors. He felt the heavy oak of the doors themselves and the 4 minutes that were now closer to 3. "And today," he said. "Today," the boy said. "She came in through the side entrance about 40 minutes ago, the one near the sacristy. She was already in her dress. She walked past where my mom and I were finishing the altar arrangements. She was holding her hand a little strangely, almost closed, the way a person holds a hand when they don't want anyone to see what is on it. I saw her ring for only a second, but it was a different ring again, sir. The center stone was smaller. The setting was thinner. The two side stones were not the same size as each other. It was a ring that looked like the first one if you were not paying attention, but it was not the first one." Nathaniel did not speak. He looked past the boy at the heavy side door, and then at the wooden door of the small room across the vestibule where the bride was meant to be waiting with her mother and her 2 attendants for the final 10 minutes before the ceremony began. "Elijah," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be honest, even if the honest answer is that you are not sure. Do you think she switched the ring? Or do you think the ring she has been wearing all along was never the one I gave her?" The boy thought about it carefully. He did not rush. He had the kind of carefulness in his face that Nathaniel had seen, over the years, only in people who had grown up understanding that the wrong word in the wrong room could end a conversation forever. "Sir," Elijah said finally, "I think the ring you gave her, the real one with the big square stone, I think she has not been wearing it for a long time. The ring at the engagement party in May, the first one I saw, the one my mom said was the most beautiful, that was the real one. But every ring after that, I think, has been a different copy each time, like she keeps losing the copies and getting new ones made, or like she keeps selling them." Nathaniel closed his eyes for one long second. He had built a life on noticing things. He had built a company on noticing things. He had noticed, over the past 9 months, 100 small details about the woman he was about to marry. He had noticed that she preferred her coffee with 2 sugars on Mondays and 1 on Fridays. He had noticed that she touched her hair when she was thinking about money. He had noticed that her mother spoke a little too quickly when the subject of the prenuptial agreement had come up at dinner in February. He had noticed all of these things and decided that none of them mattered because he was 43 years old and he had spent the last 20 of those years building something he could not bring to bed with him at night. He opened his eyes. "Elijah," he said quietly, "I want you to do something for me. I want you to step into the small room across the vestibule. The door is unlocked. There is no one in it. I want you to sit on the bench inside and I want you to wait there." Do not come out unless I open the door. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. The boy walked across the marble and into the small room without looking back. He pulled the door almost shut behind him, leaving a thin line of light. Nathaniel stood alone in the vestibule for the length of 2 breaths. The organ outside had begun the piece in earnest now. The doors would open in 90 seconds. The aisle was ready. The guests were waiting. The priest was waiting at the altar with his hands folded the way he had folded them at 22 other weddings Nathaniel had attended over the years. Nathaniel turned slowly and walked toward the wooden door of the bride's room. He did not knock. He simply turned the brass handle and opened the door. The room was small and warm. There was a tall mirror against the far wall, the kind that leaned slightly forward on a wooden frame, and a low velvet bench beneath it, and a vanity table with a vase of cream-colored roses that the florist had placed there an hour earlier. The light came from 2 narrow stained-glass windows high on the wall, and it fell across the room in pale blues and greens, the color of shallow water. Vivian Ashford was standing in front of the mirror with her back to the door. Her mother, Elaine, was seated on the velvet bench arranging the train of the dress. The 2 bridesmaids were near the vanity, one adjusting a hairpin, the other tucking a small white handkerchief into a sleeve. All 4 women turned when the door opened. For 1 second, no one spoke. Vivian's face moved through 3 expressions in less than a breath. Surprise first, then something that almost looked like fear, and then the calm, practiced smile she wore in photographs. "Nathaniel," she said, "you aren't supposed to see me before the ceremony. It's bad luck." "Vivian," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you, alone, just for 1 minute." Elaine Ashford stood up from the bench. She was a tall woman in her early 60s with the kind of upright posture that came from a lifetime of expecting to be listened to. She smiled at him the way she always smiled at him, with her mouth and not her eyes. "Nathaniel, dear, the ceremony begins in less than a minute. Whatever this is, surely it can wait until after." "It cannot," he said. He kept his voice gentle. He had learned in 20 years of business that the gentlest voice in a room was almost always the one that ended the conversation. "Ladies, would you give us the room, please? I will not keep her long." The 2 bridesmaids glanced at Elaine. Elaine looked at her daughter. Vivian gave the smallest nod. The 3 women left the room with the soft rustle of silk and shoes against carpet, and the door clicked shut behind them. Nathaniel did not move from where he stood. Vivian turned to face him fully now. The dress was beautiful, an ivory silk that had been altered 3 times to fit her exactly, and her dark hair was pinned back beneath a veil of antique lace that had been in her family. She had told him since the 1880s. Her left hand rested at her side, half curled, the way a person holds a hand when they do not want anyone to see what is on it. "Vivian," Nathaniel said quietly, "I want to see your ring." There was a small pause. It lasted perhaps half a second longer than it should have. "My ring." "Yes, the ring I gave you in March. Hold up your left hand, please," she smiled. The smile was almost convincing. "Nathaniel, what is this? You are being strange. Has someone said something to you? Is this one of your business calls bleeding into our day? Whatever it is, it can wait 1 hour." He did not raise his voice. He did not move toward her. "Hold up your left hand, please," he said again. Her smile faded by degrees. She raised her left hand slowly. The ring was on the 4th finger. From a distance of 5 feet in the watery blue-green light of the small room, it looked like the ring he had given her in March. The same setting, the same square center stone, the same 2 smaller stones at the sides. He took 2 slow steps toward her. He stopped close enough to see clearly. The center stone did not catch the light the way the original had. It had a flat brightness to it, the kind of brightness that depends on the angle, not on the depth of the cut. The 2 side stones were not perfectly matched. One was a half shade warmer than the other. The prongs of the setting were the same shape, but the metal had a slightly different finish, as if it had been polished too quickly. He looked at her face. "Vivian," he said quietly, "this is not the ring I gave you." She did not answer for a moment. Her chin lifted a small fraction. He had seen her use that motion at dinners with people she did not like, just before she changed the subject. "Of course it is, Nathaniel, don't be ridiculous. I have not taken it off since you gave it to me. You watched me put it on yourself." "I watched you put on a ring," he said. "I am not certain it has been the same ring since." Her hand closed slightly. It was the smallest movement. A person who was not looking for it would not have seen it. "He had been looking for it. Who told you this?" she said. Her voice had changed. It was lower now. The practiced smile was gone. "Who has been talking to you? Was it your sister? Was it that lawyer of yours, what's his name, with the awful tie? Whatever they said, Nathaniel, they are wrong." "It was a boy," he said. "A boy who works with his mother arranging flowers. He has seen you 3 times in 2 months. He noticed before I did." She looked at him for a long second. And then slowly the calm came back into her face. Not the practiced smile this time, something colder, something he had not seen in 9 months. "A boy," she repeated softly. "A child noticed, from the corner where he was setting candles, and you believed him." "I believed him," Nathaniel said quietly, "because the moment he said it, I realized I had already known." Vivian was silent for a long moment. Outside the door, far away through the heavy stone of the cathedral, the organ moved into the opening phrases of the processional. The piece they had chosen together in February, sitting on the bench of an old piano in his apartment, while she rested her head against his shoulder and told him that this was the happiest she had ever been. The notes climbed slowly. Somewhere on the other side of the oak doors, 300 guests were beginning to stand. She lowered her hand. The ring caught the watery light once and then, exactly as the boy had said, lost it. "Nathaniel," she said quietly, "this is not the place. There are 300 people out there. There are photographers from 2 magazines. There is my father who flew in from London yesterday. There is your board. Whatever you think you know, this is not the moment to discuss it. Walk down the aisle with me. We will speak about this tonight. We will speak about it tomorrow. We will speak about it for as long as you want. But not here, not now." "Vivian," he said, "where is the ring I gave you in March?" She did not answer. "Vivian, where is it?" She turned slightly away from him, toward the mirror. She looked at her own reflection for a long second, and he watched her do it, and he understood that she was not looking at herself the way a bride looks at herself before she walks down an aisle. She was looking at herself the way a player at a card table looks at the cards in her hand when the round has not gone the way she planned. "It is in a safe," she said finally, "in a building on the east side. It has been there since June." "Why?" She did not turn back to face him. She spoke to the mirror. "Because I needed it to be there. Because there were things I had to pay for, Nathaniel, that I could not ask you to pay for. Because my father's business has not been what he has told you it has been. Because my mother has been writing checks she has no money to cover, to charities, and to a man in Geneva she calls her financial advisor, who is neither financial nor an advisor. Because when you gave me that ring, I understood for the first time in 3 years that there was something I owned that was worth enough to fix what my family had broken. And I told myself I would buy it back. I told myself I would replace it before the wedding. I had a copy made in April, and then I had to sell the copy in June, and then I had another copy made, and then I had to sell that one too." She said all of it without any particular emotion. She said it the way a person reads a list of expenses to an accountant who has already seen the worst of it. Nathaniel stood very still. "How much?" he said quietly. "The original." "How much did you get for it?" 312,000, she said. "From a private buyer in Zurich. My mother arranged it. My mother arranged all of it. And the copies, 8,000 each, sometimes 9. I sold them through a man in the diamond district who does not ask questions when the seller is desperate and the stones are small. And the ring on your finger right now, today, it cost 6,000, she said. I picked it up 2 days ago. The original jeweler I used has stopped returning my calls. This one was made by a man in Queens who could do it in 4 days. It is not as well made as the others. The boy was right. He was right about everything. I knew when I put it on this morning that it would not pass close inspection. I told myself no one would look at it closely until after the ceremony. I told myself I would have until tomorrow to think of what to say. She turned then finally and looked at him. Nathaniel, she said, I was going to tell you tonight. I was going to tell you everything. I had a letter written. It is in my mother's handbag right now. I was going to give it to you at the hotel. I was going to ask you to forgive me. I was going to ask you to let me make it right over the years we had ahead of us. He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the apartment on the river. He thought about the garden in March. He thought about the way she had cried when he opened the small velvet box and held the ring up to the late afternoon light. He thought about how in that moment he had believed that her tears were for him. He had been wrong. He understood that now. The tears had been real, but they had not been for him. They had been for the relief of a woman who had just been handed a thing she could turn into money. Vivian, he said quietly, the ring is not the part that matters. The ring is only an object. Objects can be replaced. What I am trying to understand is why you did not ask me. In 9 months, Vivian, I am not a man who counts every coin. You have eaten at my table. You have met my sister. You have met my accountant. You have met 3 of the men I trust most in the world. Any one of them would have helped you. I would have helped you. The amount you sold the ring for, $312,000, is a number I could have written a check for in the time it would have taken you to finish a sentence. Why did you not ask me? She did not answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was very small. Because I did not want you to know what kind of family you were marrying into. Nathaniel looked at her for one long second. There was something in her voice he had not heard before. Not the cold calm of a minute earlier, not the practiced softness of the past 9 months. It was the voice of a woman who, somewhere behind all of it, was still 26 years old and ashamed of her own mother. He almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Vivian, he said quietly, I would have known the kind of family I was marrying into the moment I asked. I would have helped anyway. I do not marry portfolios. I marry people. If you had told me in April that your father's business was failing, I would have looked at the books with him myself. If you had told me that your mother was writing checks she could not cover, I would have called my own attorney, and we would have stopped the bleeding before it became a flood. I would not have loved you any less. I might have loved you more, because I would have known that you trusted me with the truth. She did not speak. Instead, he said, you sold the ring my grandmother helped me design. You sold the side stones that came from a brooch my mother wore at her own wedding in 1958. You sold them to a stranger in Zurich, and you replaced them with glass, and you let me put that glass on your finger and walk into rooms with you for 9 months, and you let me bring you to my sister's house on Thanksgiving, and you let me stand with you at my grandfather's grave on the anniversary of his death, and the whole time you knew that the ring on your hand was a lie. He stopped. He had not raised his voice. He realized with a small clinical part of his mind that he was not going to. I would have helped you, Vivian. I am not telling you this to hurt you. I am telling you because it is the part you will have to live with. You did not lose me by needing money. You lost me by deciding I was the kind of man who could not be trusted with the truth. The organ outside the door had now finished the opening of the processional and was holding on a soft, sustained chord, the way it does in the half-minute before the doors open. Somewhere in the cathedral, a coordinator with a clipboard was looking at her watch and beginning to wonder. Vivian sat down slowly on the velvet bench. The dress arranged itself in heavy folds around her. She did not cry. She put her hands flat on her knees and looked at the floor. What are you going to do? She said. Nathaniel did not answer right away. He turned and walked back to the door of the small room. He opened it. The vestibule was empty. The light through the stained glass behind him made the same red and gold pattern on the marble that it had made 11 minutes earlier, when his life had been one thing and was now another. He crossed the vestibule. He opened the door of the room across from hers. Elijah was sitting on the bench inside, exactly where Nathaniel had asked him to sit, with the small bunch of white lilies still resting on his lap. The boy looked up. Elijah, Nathaniel said quietly, I need you to come with me. I am not going to ask you to say anything. I'm only going to ask you to stand beside me for a few minutes while I do something that I have to do. Is that all right?" "Yes, sir." "Good." The boy stood up. He carried the lilies with him because he did not know what else to do with them. They walked together across the vestibule. Nathaniel did not return to Vivian's room. He went instead to the far door, the one that led to a small side corridor that ran behind the altar and came out at the rear of the choir stalls. He stopped before he opened it. "Elijah," he said, "in about 2 minutes I am going to walk into the cathedral. I am going to walk past 300 people. I am going to walk up to the altar where the priest is waiting, and then I am going to do something that none of those people are expecting. I want you to walk in with me, but not all the way to the altar. There is a small side pew, 2 rows from the front on the left side, that has been reserved for the florists and the staff. Your mother is sitting in it. I want you to go and sit beside her. I do not want you in the front. I do not want you near me when this happens. I want you safe with her. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. And Elijah," the boy looked up, "thank you. Whatever happens next, in the next 10 minutes, in the next 10 years, I want you to remember that you did the right thing this morning. You looked at something carefully when no one else was looking. You told a stranger the truth even though you did not have to. There are men 3 times your age in that cathedral right now who have never done what you did this morning. I want you to know that I know it." The boy did not say anything. He nodded once, the way he had nodded in the vestibule 11 minutes earlier, the small, steady nod of a child who had been raised to receive a serious thing seriously. Nathaniel opened the side door. The light of the cathedral fell across them. The cathedral was enormous in the way only old buildings are enormous, with a ceiling so high that the sound of 300 people standing rose into it and disappeared. The morning light came down through the high windows in long pale beams, and the air smelled of beeswax and lilies and the faint cedar of the old pews. Nathaniel stepped through the side door into the corridor behind the altar. He walked the short distance to the opening at the rear of the choir stalls, and there he paused for a moment, in the small shadow where the marble of the apse met the wood of the stalls, and looked out across the nave. 300 faces. Many of them familiar. His sister Margaret in the second row on the right with her husband and their 2 daughters. 3 members of his board. The mayor, whom he had not invited but who had come anyway because the wedding had been written about in a magazine. His grandfather's oldest business partner, 91 years old, sitting between his grandson and his granddaughter in the 3rd row. A small woman with her hair tied back, wearing a simple gray dress, sitting in the side pew 2 rows from the front, who looked up the moment Elijah stepped into the side aisle, and whose hand went to her chest the way a mother's hand goes to her chest when she does not yet understand what is happening, but understands that something is. The priest was at the altar. He was a kind man in his late 70s whom Nathaniel had known since he was a boy. He saw Nathaniel emerge from the side and his eyebrows rose by the smallest fraction, because grooms did not enter from the side and the doors at the back had not yet opened. Nathaniel walked. He walked to the foot of the altar, past the wooden communion rail and stopped in front of the priest. Elijah, in the side aisle, walked quickly and quietly to where his mother was sitting. He slipped into the pew beside her. She put her arm around his shoulders without taking her eyes off Nathaniel. The cathedral became very quiet. It became quiet in stages. The people who could see Nathaniel directly fell silent first, then the people behind them, then the people at the very back. The organist, who had been holding the sustained chord that came before the processional, played one more soft phrase that he had not planned to play, the way an organist will sometimes improvise a moment of grace when he senses that the program he has been given is no longer the program of the day. Then he, too, fell silent. 300 people stood in stillness. Nathaniel turned slowly with his back to the altar and faced the room. "My friends," he said. The cathedral acoustics carried the 2 words almost without effort. He had spoken at his grandfather's funeral in this same building 8 years earlier. He had learned that day that the room would do most of the work for him if he simply spoke clearly and slowly. "My friends," he said again, "I owe you all an apology. You have come here this morning from many cities and from 3 countries. You have rearranged your work and your weeks. You have bought gifts. You have written cards. You have put on suits that you do not enjoy wearing. You have done all of this because you were invited to witness a marriage, and the marriage is not going to take place." He paused. A small intake of breath moved through the room like a wave. Margaret in the second row raised one hand slowly to her mouth. 2 of the bridesmaids, who had returned from the bride's room and were standing near the rear doors of the cathedral, exchanged a look that contained no surprise, only a kind of resigned recognition, as if some part of them had been bracing for this for longer than they had admitted to themselves. "I am not going to explain to you, in this room, the reason," Nathaniel said. "It is not the kind of reason that should be discussed in front of 300 people on a Saturday morning. It is a private matter. It will remain a private matter. I will say only this. The decision is mine. It is not Vivian's. I am asking you not to blame her in your conversations on the way home. I am asking you not to gossip in ways that will reach her family. There has been a misunderstanding between us. I have decided that it is a misunderstanding too large to walk past. I am the one ending the ceremony. Any anger you feel, please direct it at me." He looked around the room. "Father Wellen," he said quietly, turning slightly toward the priest, "I am sorry. You prepared us for this morning with great care. I will come to see you next week. I will come alone." The priest, who had heard many things in 51 years of standing at altars, simply nodded once. There was no judgment in his face. There was something almost like compassion. He had seen in those 51 years a number of weddings that should have been stopped, and only 1 or 2 that actually were. He understood, looking at Nathaniel, that he was watching one of the rare ones. Nathaniel turned back to the room. "The reception was to be held at the Hartwell Hotel beginning at 1 o'clock, he said. "The food has been prepared. The musicians have been booked. The rooms have been arranged. I would like you to go anyway, please. Eat the meal. Listen to the music. Spend the afternoon with the people you came with. I will pay for everything as planned. There is no reason for any of you to leave this morning hungry or empty-handed because of a decision I have made about my own life." He stopped. He looked, finally, toward the small side pew 2 rows from the front on the left. Elijah was sitting beside his mother. His mother had her arm around him. The boy was looking at Nathaniel with the same steady, unmoving attention that he had shown in the vestibule 11 minutes earlier. "There is one more thing," Nathaniel said. "There is a boy in this room who I did not know yesterday. His name is Elijah. He works with his mother arranging the flowers that you have all admired this morning. He saved me, this morning, from making the largest mistake of my life. I would like all of you, on your way out, to thank his mother for raising him. I would like you to remember his name. I would like you to remember that sometimes the most important voice in a room is the smallest one." A small sound came from the side pew. It was the sound of a mother trying not to cry in public and failing for one short breath. Nathaniel inclined his head once, toward the room, the way a man inclines his head when he is finished speaking. Then he walked, slowly and steadily, down the long center aisle, past 300 silent people, toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral. He did not look at any of the faces as he passed. He kept his eyes on the doors. He had learned, somewhere over the years, that a man could walk through almost anything if he simply chose a point on the far wall and walked toward it. He passed the row where Margaret was sitting. She reached out and touched his sleeve as he went by. It was the smallest touch. He did not stop. He felt her fingers on his arm for half a second, and then they were gone, and he understood that she would meet him outside. He reached the doors. The ushers, 2 young men in matching gray suits, stood on either side. They did not know what to do. They had been trained to open the doors at a particular moment, and they had not been trained for this moment. Nathaniel reached past the one on the left and pulled the brass handle himself. The heavy oak door swung open into the morning. The light outside was bright in the way that only an autumn morning can be bright after a long stretch of gray weather. He walked down the wide stone steps to the sidewalk. The car was waiting at the curb, the long black car that had been arranged to drive him and his bride to the hotel. The driver, Anthony, was standing beside the rear door. Anthony had worked for the Carrington family for 19 years. He had driven Nathaniel's grandfather to a hospital one night in 2006 and had not been thanked for it because Nathaniel's grandfather had not lived through the night. And Anthony had carried that small unthanked thing with him ever since, with the kind of quiet pride that a certain kind of man carries such things. Anthony saw Nathaniel's face. He did not ask. He opened the rear door. "Anthony," Nathaniel said quietly, "I am not going to the hotel. I am going to the office. The river office, not the headquarters. I need to make some calls from a place where no one will look for me for the next 2 hours." "Yes, sir." "And Anthony, there is a woman inside the cathedral in a gray dress, sitting in the second pew from the front on the left side. She has a son with her, about 10 years old. After they leave the building, after the crowd has gone, I would like you to come back here and find her. Her name is Lillian, I believe. The boy's name is Elijah. I would like you to bring them to the office, quietly, not in this car. Take a regular car. Tell them that I have asked to see them and that they are not in any trouble and that I will explain everything when they arrive." "Yes, sir." Nathaniel got into the back of the car. Anthony closed the door behind him. The car pulled away from the curb and turned onto the avenue and drove away from the cathedral with the calm steadiness of a vehicle that had been driven by the same man for 19 years. Nathaniel did not look back. He sat in the back seat and looked at his own hands for a long time. The cuff of his shirt was still half-buttoned from the vestibule. He had not noticed. He buttoned it now, slowly and carefully, the way a man buttons a cuff when he is trying to bring himself back into the ordinary world. The car crossed the bridge over the river. The water below was dark and slow. A small barge was working its way south toward the docks. He watched it for the length of 2 breaths. Then he took his phone out of his inside jacket pocket and turned it on. It buzzed 11 times in the first 10 seconds. He ignored all of it. He scrolled past the missed calls and the messages and went to his contacts and pressed the name of a man named Howard Brennan. Howard had been the head of his personal security for 13 years. He had once been a senior agent at the Bureau before he had decided that he would rather work for one man than for an entire country. Howard had not been at the wedding. Howard never attended Nathaniel's social events. Howard's role was elsewhere. Howard at this moment was in his small office on the second floor of the River Building, drinking the second cup of coffee of his morning and reading a report. The line picked up on the first ring. "Howard," Nathaniel said quietly, "the wedding is off. I need you to do 3 things for me before noon." There was a small pause on the other end. Howard had heard Nathaniel use this tone exactly 4 times in 13 years. He did not ask a single question. "Go ahead." "First, I need a complete background reconstruction on Vivian Ashford and her parents. Everything. Bank accounts, business filings, tax records, any criminal complaints, any civil suits, anything that has been quietly settled out of court. I want it on my desk by tonight. Use the firm in Chicago if you have to." "Yes." "Second, there is a jeweler in Queens who made a copy of an engagement ring in the past 4 days. I want his name. I want his address. I want to know how many other copies he has made for the same client in the past 9 months. I want this done without him understanding that anyone is asking. Do not approach him directly. I do not want him alerted. I want to know whether other rings, other items have been copied as well, whether other clients in our circle have been similarly arranged." "Yes." "Third, the original ring is in a safe in a building on the east side of the city. I do not know which building. Vivian's mother arranged the sale to a private buyer in Zurich in June. I want the ring back. I do not care what it costs. I want the buyer found. I want the ring purchased back from him at any price he names. If the price is unreasonable, double it. I want the ring on my desk before the end of the month. Understood?" "Howard." "Yes." "There is one more thing. It is not for today, but put it in your notebook. There is a boy, 10 years old. His name is Elijah. His mother arranges flowers for events at the cathedral and at 3 or 4 hotels in the city. I want a quiet file on her, not because anything is wrong, because I want to know who she is. I want to know what she needs. I want to know it without her ever knowing I asked. I will have it by Friday. Thank you, Howard. The line went quiet. Nathaniel set the phone on the seat beside him. The car continued across the bridge. The river office occupied the top 2 floors of a narrow brick building that Nathaniel's grandfather had purchased in 1962, when the neighborhood had been mostly warehouses and fishmongers, and the river had still smelled of the things that came in from the sea. The building had been quietly preserved over the decades. The wide plank floors were original. The brass fittings on the doors were original. The view from the upstairs windows looked out over the working stretch of the river, the part that the magazines did not photograph, where the tugs still moved barges in the early mornings, and the longshoremen still worked in shifts that ended before most of the city had finished its breakfast. It was the place Nathaniel came when he needed to think. He arrived at 10:20. The building was nearly empty on a Saturday. The man at the front desk, a retired police officer named Frank who had worked the door for 11 years, stood up when Nathaniel walked in and did not ask why he was wearing a wedding suit. Frank simply nodded once, the way Anthony had nodded, and pressed the button that called the small private elevator at the end of the lobby. Nathaniel rode up alone. The office on the top floor was a long room with windows on 3 sides. There was a desk of dark wood at the far end, and a leather chair behind it, and 2 armchairs in front of it, and a low bookshelf along one wall that held no books, only photographs. The photographs were of his grandfather at the docks in 1952, his grandfather with the first ship that had carried the Carrington name in 1959, his grandfather at the wedding of Nathaniel's parents in 1979, his grandfather holding Nathaniel as an infant in 1982. There were no photographs of anyone else in the room. He had not put any up since his grandfather had died, and he had not added any of his own life because his own life had not, until this morning, seemed important enough to record. He walked to the desk. He sat down. He looked out the window at the river. For a long time he did not move. He thought about Vivian. He thought about the way she had looked when she had said the words, "I did not want you to know what kind of family you were marrying into." He thought about the way her chin had lifted before she said it, the small, involuntary gesture of a woman who had been raised by Elaine Ashford to lift her chin whenever she was about to say something that hurt. He understood, sitting at the desk with the morning light coming across his hands, that he had spent 9 months loving a woman he did not actually know. The woman he had loved had been a careful arrangement of the woman in front of him, edited and presented for his benefit. The real woman was probably not a bad person. She was probably, like her mother, a frightened person who had learned to manage her fear by managing the people around her. He understood that he could feel sorry for her without choosing to spend the rest of his life with her. He understood that those 2 things were allowed to coexist. He thought about the boy. He thought about the boy for a long time. He thought about the moment in the vestibule when Elijah had said, "The ring on her finger, sir, the one she has been wearing, it isn't real." He thought about the way the boy had carried the small bunch of white lilies the whole time, even when he had been sitting on the bench in the side room waiting for Nathaniel to come back for him. He thought about the boy walking down the side aisle to sit beside his mother. He thought about the boy's mother putting her arm around him in the pew. He thought about the kind of woman who taught a child to look at things, who taught him that the world owed him no particular favors but that he owed the world the truth. At 11 o'clock the phone on the desk rang. It was the intercom from downstairs. Frank's voice was low and respectful. "Mr. Carrington, Anthony has arrived with 2 guests. A woman and a boy. Shall I send them up?" "Yes, please, and Frank, bring up a tray with whatever we have in the small kitchen. Sandwiches, fruit, whatever there is, and a bottle of something for the boy. Apple juice if there is any, milk if not. Yes, sir. Nathaniel stood up from the desk. He walked to the windows and looked out at the river for one more long moment. Then he walked to the door of the office and opened it and waited. The elevator chimed at the end of the hall. The doors opened. Anthony stepped out first and held the door for the woman and the boy. Elijah was still wearing the borrowed white dress shirt and the trousers that were a little too short. The lilies were gone now. He must have left them in the pew. His mother walked beside him. She had taken her hair out of the practical knot it had been in at the cathedral, and it fell to her shoulders in soft, dark waves. She had a coat folded over her arm. She looked, Nathaniel thought, very much like a woman who had been on her feet since 4 in the morning arranging flowers for someone else's wedding and was now being asked to walk into a stranger's office on the day that wedding had not taken place. He stepped out into the hallway to meet them. Lillian, he said quietly. He was not certain of her name, but he had used it the way Anthony had said it on the phone, and her small nod confirmed that he had it right. Lillian, Elijah. Thank you for coming. Please come in. He led them into the long office. The boy looked at the windows first, the way a child looks at something larger than he had expected. His mother looked at the photographs on the bookshelf. She paused for a small second at the photograph of Nathaniel's grandfather at the docks in 1952, and then she walked on. Nathaniel gestured to the 2 armchairs. Please, sit. Both of you. I have asked for a tray to be brought up. You have been on your feet all morning, and so has your son, and so have I, and I think the 3 of us could use something to eat before we say anything important. Lillian sat down slowly. Elijah sat in the chair beside hers. He did not lean back. He sat the way he had sat on the bench in the side room of the cathedral, with his hands folded in his lap and his back straight, waiting. Nathaniel sat across from them, in the leather chair behind the desk. For a long moment none of them spoke. It was Lillian in the end who broke the silence. Mr. Carrington, she said quietly, I do not know exactly why we are here, but I want to say something to you before we say anything else. What you did this morning, stopping the wedding, speaking the way you spoke, mentioning my son by name in front of 300 people, that was a kindness I did not expect, from anyone, ever. I want to thank you for it. Nathaniel looked at her. Lillian, he said, the kindness was yours, not mine. I am only the man who heard it. Frank came up with the tray a moment later. He set it on the low table between the armchairs and the desk. There were small sandwiches cut into triangles and a bowl of grapes and a plate of cheese and a small glass bottle of apple juice with the paper label still on it. Frank had remembered. He set the bottle in front of Elijah with the same small, respectful nod he gave to senators and to dock workers. Then he left and closed the door behind him. For the next 20 minutes they ate. They did not talk about the morning. Nathaniel had decided, somewhere between the cathedral and the office, that he was not going to ask the boy a single question about what he had seen or what he had said. The boy had already done the work of telling the truth once, and the truth had been heard, and the boy was now 10 years old again, and 10-year-old boys should not be required to relive the moments in which they were braver than the adults around them. So Nathaniel asked instead, what kinds of flowers were in season this month. He asked Lillian whether she had been arranging flowers all her life or whether she had come to it later. He asked Elijah what book he was reading. The boy said he was on the 2nd volume of a series about a young detective in Victorian London, and Nathaniel asked him whether he had figured out who the murderer was yet, and the boy said no, but he had 3 suspects, and Nathaniel asked him to describe them, and the boy did, and the boy's mother watched her son talk to a stranger about books with the small, still pride that mothers wear when they are watching their child be the person they raised him to be. When the food was finished, Nathaniel set his napkin on the table and looked at them both. Lillian, he said quietly, I am going to say some things now, and I would like you to let me finish before you respond. They are not small things, but I have been thinking about them for 2 hours, and I would like to say them while I can. She nodded. I do not believe in coincidences in the way that some people do, Nathaniel said. I do not believe that your son was meant to be in the catering hallway this morning, or in the cathedral, or anywhere else. I believe only that he was there and that he looked at something carefully and that he chose to speak. I do not believe his choice was destined. I believe it was earned. It was earned by the way you have raised him. It was earned by every Sunday you have taken him to a library. It was earned by every evening you have sat with him at a kitchen table and helped him with his homework. It was earned by every time you have told him that the world will not always reward him for telling the truth, but that he must tell it anyway. He paused. I cannot pay you for that. I want to be clear with you about this. There is no amount of money that would be the correct amount. If I offered you a number, I would be insulting both of us. So I am not going to offer you a number. I am going to offer you something else. Lillian did not speak. She waited. I would like to set up an education trust in your son's name, Nathaniel said. It will not be administered by me. It will be administered by a firm that has handled my family's affairs for 60 years. It will pay for any school he wishes to attend, from this point until he no longer wishes to be in school. If he chooses to study music or literature or marine biology or to become a priest, the trust will pay for it. If he chooses not to attend a university at all and to apprentice to a craftsman instead, the trust will pay for that. The decision will be his. The trust will exist whether or not I am alive to see him use it. You will not need to ask anyone for permission to access it. It will be his completely. He looked at the boy. That is the first thing. The second thing is for you, Lillian, not for him. She looked at him steadily. My family has a foundation, he said. It was started by my grandfather in 1968. For many years it has done work that is competent and unimaginative. It funds the right hospitals and the right libraries and the right scholarships. It does no harm. It also does very little that is interesting. I have wanted for several years now to change that. I have not had the time. I have not had the right person. He paused. I would like to offer you a position with the foundation. The title is yours to choose. The salary will be whatever number you write on a piece of paper. The work will be whatever work you decide is worth doing. I do not have a list of things I want you to fund. I have instead a long-standing suspicion that the people who know which work is worth funding are not the people who currently sit on most foundation boards. The people who know are the people who have spent their lives close to the ground, cleaning offices, driving buses, arranging flowers at weddings that other people are paying for. You are one of those people. I would like to give you a desk and a budget and the authority to direct a portion of my family's money toward work that you believe in. I am not asking you to take the position today. I am asking you to think about it. He stopped. He looked at her. She was very still. For a long moment she did not say anything at all. Then she said quietly, Mr. Carrington, may I ask you one question? Of course. Why? He did not answer right away. He looked past her at the photograph of his grandfather at the docks in 1952, a young man in a worn coat standing beside a ship that had not yet brought him the life he would build. There were many people in that photograph in the background, dock workers, office clerks, women carrying baskets, children running across the wet boards. Most of them had no names that anyone now remembered. They had built the world that his grandfather had walked into, and his grandfather had walked into it, and his grandfather had built what he built, and the names of those people had disappeared. Because, Nathaniel said quietly, I have spent my life around people whose names appear on buildings. And I have come to believe that the most important people in any city are almost never the people whose names appear on buildings. They are the people who clean those buildings at night. They are the people who arrange the flowers in the lobbies. They are the people who teach their children to look at things. I have known this for a long time, Lillian. I have done very little about it. I would like to do something about it. And I would like to do it with someone who has lived the life I have not lived, and who understands what I do not understand. That is why. She did not speak for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. I will think about it, she said. That is all I ask. They stayed for another hour. The afternoon sun moved across the long room and warmed the wide plank floors and turned the river outside the windows from gray to a pale silver green. Elijah, somewhere in the second half of that hour, found his way over to the bookshelf with the photographs and began to ask Nathaniel about them. Who was the man in the worn coat? What year had this picture been taken? Was that a ship in the background? What had the ship been carrying? Nathaniel answered every question carefully. He had not spoken about his grandfather to a child before. He found that he liked the shape of the answers when he gave them to a boy who was paying attention. At 3 o'clock, Anthony drove them home. Nathaniel stood at the window of the long office and watched the car pull away from the curb below and turn at the corner and disappear into the late afternoon traffic. He stood there for a long time after the car was gone. Then he turned and walked back to the desk and sat down and began the work of unmaking a life he had spent 9 months building. In the weeks that followed, the work was steady and quiet. The Hartwell Hotel was paid for as promised. Every guest who had come to the cathedral that morning ate the meal that had been prepared for the reception. The musicians played. Margaret, his sister, gave a small speech at one of the long tables, and the speech was about her brother, and the people who heard it remembered it for a long time. The original ring was located in Zurich within 9 days. The buyer had been a private collector who had paid Vivian's mother in cash. Howard's people approached him through an intermediary. The price he named was 3 times what he had paid. Nathaniel did not negotiate. The ring arrived at the river office on a Tuesday morning in a small velvet box, exactly as it had looked the day Nathaniel had first opened it in Antwerp. Nathaniel did not put it on display. He did not give it to anyone. He placed it in a small safe in the bottom drawer of his desk and locked the drawer, and he understood that he would decide in his own time what to do with it. Vivian wrote him a letter 3 weeks after the wedding. It was a long letter. It was honest in places where she had never been honest before, and it was self-serving in places where she could not yet help herself, and Nathaniel read it twice and then placed it in a folder in a different drawer. He did not write back. He did not see her again. He was told 6 months later that she had moved to a small city in the south of France where her father had a cousin, and that she was working in a gallery there, and that she seemed to be doing better. He hoped that was true. He did not investigate. Elaine Ashford's affairs were quietly examined. Several people who had been owed money by her for a long time were repaid. The man in Geneva who called himself her financial advisor was found to be the subject of 3 separate investigations in 2 countries, and the information about him was passed, through Howard, to the proper authorities. Nathaniel asked for nothing in return. He had decided that the most useful thing he could do with the rest of his life was to make the world slightly more difficult for people who hurt the people who could not defend themselves. Lillian accepted the position at the foundation 7 weeks after the morning at the cathedral. She named a salary that was lower than the salary Nathaniel had been prepared to offer her, and he raised it twice before she would sign. She chose the title Director of Community Inquiry, because she said she did not yet know what the work was, only that the work began with listening. In the first year, she directed funds to a literacy program for the children of night shift workers, to a small fund that paid the rent of families during the months when a parent was undergoing cancer treatment, and to 3 community gardens in neighborhoods Nathaniel had driven past for 20 years without ever entering. Each grant she made was modest. Each grant she made changed lives. Elijah finished the 2nd volume of his detective series, and then the 3rd, and then he asked Nathaniel one Sunday afternoon at the country property whether Nathaniel would like to read the first one. Nathaniel said yes. The 2 of them sat on the porch in the late afternoon, and Elijah read aloud from the first chapter, and Nathaniel listened with the small, grave attention of a man who had been given a second chance at a kind of life he had not known he wanted. There are stories that we tell ourselves about how the world works, about who matters and who does not, about which lives are visible and which are not. Most of those stories are wrong. The people who save us are almost never the people we expect. The warnings come from voices we have been trained not to hear, in hallways we do not walk, from children whose names we have never bothered to learn. Elijah looked at a ring that did not catch the light the right way. He looked at it 3 times over 2 months. He told the truth about what he had seen, even though he had no reason to expect that anyone would listen. He did it because his mother had taught him to look at things. He did it because doing the right thing was, in his family, the simplest and the hardest thing in the world. Pay attention to the small voices. Learn the names of the people who arrange the flowers at your wedding, who clean your offices at night, who hand you your coffee in the morning. Never assume that the most important person in your life today is the person whose name is already on your calendar. Sometimes the bravest voice in the room is the smallest one, and sometimes all it takes to change the entire course of a life is 4 words, spoken quietly by a child who refused to look away. If this story moved you, please tap the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so the next story finds you. 2. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and remember always to listen to the small voices in your life. You never know which one might save you.